Hello and welcome to another episode of ISO 400. I am your host, Julius Motal. ISO 400 is a video interview series with photographers by the Photographer, where I serve as the managing editor. In this episode, I'll be talking with Gareth Pon, a South African filmmaker and photographer who is one of the most popular Instagram accounts out of South Africa. He came to photography several years ago when he downloaded Instagram on a whim and then started photographing with his phone. In this episode, we'll hear about his story, his approach, the importance of community building through Instagram, and much more. So please sit back and enjoy this episode. As always, our music is provided by Yuki Futami, a New York-based jazz musician. And if you like what we do, please share this with your friends and hit subscribe down below. Thanks so much and hope you enjoy. So, welcome to this, the 5th episode of ISO 400. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Cool, pleasure.
So, as far as I know, you are a filmmaker and a photographer. Been doing filmmaking for longer than you've been photographing. Founded the official Instagrammer South Africa community, and you have a pretty sizable Instagram following. So, if we could go back, because I had read in a previous piece that you had kind of downloaded Instagram on a whim, and then just started snapping away with your iPhone. So what was the transition like going from filmmaking, moving pictures to still pictures for you?
Yeah, so basically, filmmaking was obviously still quite a big passion of mine, and starting to shoot photos with my phone was just another creative outlet for me, So in terms of the thinking of what I capture and the storytelling elements and all of that, the consistencies are quite similar in that sense,
Yeah.
So, but initially, the main reason I was doing it was just to have another creative outlet. It was something that was forcing me to look for a new photo every day.
Yeah. Something
that I could use as a way to explore different parts of the city, that sort of thing. The small challenge that I did have was trying to capture a single moment instead of capturing sort of like a full sequence of events.
Right.
So that was definitely a learning curve, because initially I was thinking in motion, whereas the shift is thinking about just capturing that 1 second,
Yeah.
So, but I love it. It came as a challenge. It came as something that grew me as an individual.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that. So
yeah. And how soon or how much time into using Instagram did you really start to notice its potential for community building?
I would say probably less than a month after posting. So a friend of mine in Joburg as well, we live in the same city, and we just decided one day to go out into the city and start snapping photos away. And building up to that date where we did our first sort of Insta meet, that people just were more interested than we thought would be. So at the first Insta meet, there were just under 10 people, which isn't huge. But after that time, realizing how fun it was and how much, I guess, passion people had for photography and having it so accessible, that's really when I was like, wow, this is actually something that can go a lot bigger than just becoming another social media app.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, I started finding guys overseas who were taking amazing photos, seeing the world through their lenses. That's something that really just blew up for me, being able to see France for the first time without even needing to go there, and also from the perspective of not being a Google search.
Yeah.
So it was personal point of views of a baker or a teacher who's living in the city. So as soon as I realized that reality was there, I think that was when sort of the switch went on.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is something I could really pursue.
And through meeting other photographers and shooting with them at these Insta meets, what have you learned about yourself photographically? Like, how have you grown as you've been meeting and photographing with other people?
Yeah. Well, initially I realized that my composition really sucked. So I guess as I discovered more photographers, also locally and internationally, I realized like, wow, that I'm missing composition. So
Hmm.
the more I shot, more that developed, and the better I got at that. Like that was just and I mean they do say that composition is one of the defining factors of being like a
Yeah.
real photographer. And so that was like one of the main things that I realized initially. But then secondly, I realized that it was definitely a platform that just allowed me to have constant feedback in terms of
Mm.
how am I doing? Like, did that photo do too well? Or like, why am I posting this photo? It's just questions I had to continuously ask myself, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I got to a point where I was actually posting photos purely for engagement, which
Mm.
totally can kill your style of who you are as a photographer.
Hmm.
And when I realized I was doing that, I actually took a step back and I was like, wait, I need to start figuring out what I like what is my style, what do I love photographing,
Hmm.
is the engagement determining what I take photos of? Like, do I take a photo purely because I'll get more likes on it, or do I
Hmm.
take the photo because I actually wanted to capture that moment?
Right.
So, so for me, that was a like a big reflection,
Mm.
a self reflection going through that, and that was only like a year ago. It sounds like I'm talking about something that happened in my young days,
Hmm.
but that's something that I had to go through, and just I got to a point where I said to myself, if I'm posting photos purely for the likes and engagement, then my Instagram account doesn't belong to me anymore. My photography
Mm.
doesn't belong to me anymore. So from that point, like it's just been a process of continuously asking that question, like, what do I love photographing? What do
Mm.
I love about capturing that still, that moment? And yeah, just it grew me in the sense of just being more confident in who I
Mm.
am as a image maker, and who I am as just being able to just hone in on finer details and ideas within the space, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those two things were one more technical, one more
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah, no, of
Yeah.
course. I mean, I've been following you on Instagram for several months now, but I went all the way back to the beginning. I kept hitting load more in my browser to get to when you first started posting, and as I've scrolled through and looked, there's been a definite evolution in your photography. And in the beginning, you were really fond of Dutch angles
Yeah.
and really strong
In-
colors. Um,
Interesting story around that.
I'm sure. Well, tell it if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So at one stage I was like, what can I do to make my feed look very different from
Mm,
everyone else? And I decided to just tilt everything. It was
yeah.
I came up with this hashtag called perspective pie.
Mm,
Um, and I would try and combine perspective with that tilt.
mm.
And like it's sort of loose, but the idea was that that perspective combined with that tilt made the image look like a pie, like a piece of pie that was being.
Ah, okay.
Um, and yeah, so I was literally shooting everything and anything at that angle,
Hmm.
um, just to sort of initially experiment, but
Sure.
also have something different. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But since then, there's been a definite growth both in composition, attention to color and detail, and whereas your early stuff was very visually striking, I would say more recent work has been more emotionally compelling as well as being visually striking. And when you had that moment of reflection where you realized, am I doing this purely for the likes, or like, what do I want to photograph? What is it that you realized you wanted to photograph?
Well, I think you actually mentioned it as just the emotion of
Mm-hmm.
photography, like what makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually producing a sort of like a self reflection sort of promo video for my new website.
Mm-hmm.
That'll go live hopefully within the next week. But
Mm-hmm.
the main idea around is like I believe that true creativity comes from innocence, like
Hmm.
being able to not figure things out too much, being able to hone in on raw emotion or
Mm-hmm.
taking a step back from the hustle of things. And sort of like that's what I try and capture when I'm out shooting, whether it be in a casual reflection of myself in a puddle or
Mm-hmm.
a deep emotional portrait of like a child in one of the cities. Like it's that thing that I always try and hone in on is the emotion and some sort of element of influence. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, some sort of element of innocence that
Mm-hmm.
I can draw from that moment. Also, like I set up a more practical guideline of saying I'll try and never shoot something that I can Google.
Interesting. I think that's a good approach.
Yeah, and that's something that I've just sort of set up as a guideline. And
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, like the main thing for me is just I always try to capture emotion and
Mm-hmm.
some sort of emotional just reaction that I
Mm-hmm.
try and grab, you know.
Yeah, and how did you learn to find emotion in your photographs?
Um, I would definitely say like it was something that I've always just been drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I've been filming stuff, the moment I saw emotion emerging from a scene or an actor, I'd almost like just forget about what I was doing in
Mm-hmm.
that moment and I'd turn in on that particular emotion.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I just guess I can recognize it when it happens. Like I'll often just wait for a few minutes and I feel like there's like a moment where it switches over.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you're there, then you know you're there. Like it's
Yeah.
almost like definable at times. Um, that's why I love just photographing kids and
Mm-hmm.
like engagement with kids is that they've got that element of innocence and they've got
Yeah.
that there's no reservations of showing emotion, you know. So I definitely think that's just something that I've learned to recognize, you know, as I go
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, and I remember reading that Instagram had sort of inspired a wanderlust in you too, and wanting to travel. What has, and you've been to quite a number of places. What has traveling taught you about your photography?
Yeah, so before I started using Instagram, I had absolutely no interest in leaving South Africa at
Hmm.
all.
Yeah.
I was happy to settle down here, like we build an empire and like take over South Africa or something. And yeah, I just realized how much I was missing out on. And the main reason I started traveling was to just meet these other photographers that I'd met through Instagram, like put
Hmm.
a tangible space to these places, you know.
Hmm.
And I think like while I was traveling, I just realized the distinct differences between our culture in South Africa versus the culture in the rest of the world. Like
Hmm.
I realized that as a creative here, it's sometimes more challenging.
Mm.
Sometimes it's it's a bit more of a battle. Whereas overseas, I feel like it's already quite respected. Like there's a revere that's attached to it overseas. Whereas
Hmm.
as here, it's almost like if you're a creative, there's like an unwritten law of having to prove yourself as a creative here.
Hmm.
It's definitely changing, and that is quite a generalization in terms of just overall society. But I feel like if you speak to a lot of creatives here, they'll tell you that there is a bit of a hardness to it. I wouldn't call it a struggle. Like it's not a
Mm.
struggle because you can be freely creative here, but it's not something that you can walk into a room of, say, like a lawyer or an
Mm.
accountant. And like, I'm a photographer. There won't be that same level
Sure.
of like admiration, I guess. And like it sounds very very negative, but it's actually not like
Hmm.
because of that space. There's huge opportunity and potential to be able to make the space even more amazing. So
Hmm.
to come out as the ugly duckling turning into a swan, or however you want to put it, but
Yeah.
I feel like for me, that was the main thing that stood out.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely more inspired just being around a lot more creative thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a heck of a lot just being around guys, not even necessarily speaking about photography all the time, but observing
Mm-hmm.
how guys do things during the travels, like the different styles of shooting, the different ways to capture lights and shadows.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of that, like that's also what's really made Instagram so amazing, is that I can instantly learn like smaller techniques just really through engaging in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you teach workshops too,
Yeah.
mobile workshops, as far as I can tell. What do you teach your students, and what do you learn from them in return?
Yeah. Well, I do a broad range of workshops. I do Instagram marketing ones. I do mobile photography, videography workshops, all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's all going live on the new sites. I haven't updated the website in like months. But yeah, that'll be basically, so that the idea of the mobile photography workshops is just to help people cross over that point of being a happy snapper into someone who's curating their feed a lot more. I just released a Skillshare class about just branding, like personal branding on Instagram, like just being more intentional about what you're presenting, how you bring yourself across in terms of posting photos and captions and like just the basics of it. And I find that like whenever I always love teaching, and whenever I teach people, like it's just my way of just obviously giving back. But I feel like whenever you give, you receive a lot more, you know. So that's whenever I've taught a student or done one-on-one coaching with someone or something like that, then a few months or years down the line, I see how that's really just small things that have improved.
Yeah.
And like it's just really amazing to be able to be part of that process, like helping people realize their own potential and step out, take the risks, and ultimately become a bit more successful than they were, you know. So that for me is often a moment where I'll just step back and we have a few seconds of self-reflection, just taking a bit of perspective in around that. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you teach your workshops mainly in South Africa, or have you taught them in other countries?
Yeah, for now it's been mainly in South Africa. There's a lot less people here who know the Instagram space, which is nice. It's a nice privilege where I can offer the workshops a lot more often. It's a lot more sought after, and also obviously going over onto Skillshare now, like that's just another platform that I'm looking at as well. But yeah, it's mainly been locally. At the moment, it's more with like brands where I'll offer workshops around consultation. I have done one or two overseas but particularly with brands, and just within the space, like how do we do Instagram?
Sure.
What do we do? What's the best way to do it? Yeah.
And as far as building sort of an Instagram presence, when did you notice your Instagram start to take off, and when did you realize you could actually leverage your audience?
I would say when I founded the local South African community. So that was early 2013, where I basically made it official. Like I gathered guys from all different cities in South Africa, and I said, let's launch a community of Instagram this year. Let's do something that sort of puts the platform on the map in South Africa. And shortly after that, Instagram started featuring a lot of the Insta meets we did, and then the guys around South Africa started featuring it on like local blogs, and then Instagram started featuring me on their suggested users list as well, and then international guys started featuring our Insta meets and like my feed and that sort of thing. So, I mean, definitely 2013 was where it all started. and then, but really only in terms of leveraging the numbers and the knowledge and the influence was when I'd say like towards midway last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then towards the end of last year, just more guys were approaching me, and then now it sort of all just exploded the beginning of this year, where there's a lot more sort of guys asking the right questions and wanting to understand the space better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's going to be an interesting year because I think this year is when everyone wants to know how it works.
How what works? Instagram or?
Yeah, just the space of like how do we do Instagram?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like in South Africa, you guys are blessed with great light, which can make for some fantastic photographs. So I can see why you'd want to stay in South Africa.
Sure.
But what are some of your other places to photograph from everywhere you've been?
I absolutely loved Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I always tell people like, and maybe it's got to do with my obsession with bicycles.
Mm-hmm.
But I always tell people when I arrived in Amsterdam, it was the first city I arrived in where I actually felt like I was in Europe.
Yeah.
Just because of the architecture, the culture, the people. I really love it. I need to go back.
Mm-hmm.
I loved photographing in California. Like California light is so much better than South African
Really?
light. It's so much better. It just glows in a different way. I don't know if it's like
Mm.
the fog or the air, or I don't know what it is, but it just has something different to it. There's more colors in the sky. There's more light
Mm-hmm.
that comes through in different ways, and golden hour lasts a lot longer there.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that stood out for me there. I think like in terms of within California, like San Francisco is obviously quite an easy place to photograph.
Mm-hmm.
I just got really lucky every time I went out.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I went to like the top of Slacker Hill, there were like suddenly fog would just appear, and then
Mm-hmm.
it would just be perfect every time. So I don't know if that was just my luck or the time of the year I went, but that was definitely something I loved. Berlin is also really, really cool because the Berlin guys are really big on street photography,
Oh, yeah.
capturing like little shades of lights and harsh shadows and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So photographing there was really different to anywhere else that I've been. Mainly because you're looking for different things. Like you're looking for that slight angle of shadow that will make the composition perfect, or
Mm-hmm.
that individual who may be hunched over in the right positions to convey a slight emotion. But also the guys shooting there, just they think in a different way. Like,
Mm.
and it's not necessarily about. It's not about the subject matter always. It's about finding that light within that space.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm always thinking about these things and seeing how I can bring it back to South Africa and
Mm-hmm.
sort of which suburbs and which areas will have similar vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I'm always like looking out for, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And being an avid mobile photographer, what are some of the advantages you say that mobile photography has that other cameras can't quite do, and like where do you see it going?
I would definitely say the size of the device.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like obviously I do shoot with traditional like DSLRs
Of
and
course.
cameras and all that, but whenever I shoot with my mobile device, it's obviously a lot smaller.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a few things that come with that, and firstly, it's a lot less intimidating.
Sure.
So when you ask to take portraits or go into different spaces, say like an abandoned building or that, like people are a lot more lenient and less intimidated by you maybe taking in a DSLR. So you can get away with a lot more, I found. A friend of mine does a lot of rooftoping, and whenever he's been caught in a space he's not meant to be, he's just like, oh no, I was just exploring with my phone,
Mm.
and it's away with it because he's just got his phone with him.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the factors. I would say like it forces you to consider composition a lot more
Mm.
because you can't put on a different lens. You can't necessarily put a zoom lens on or anything like that. You obviously can get third-party lenses, like the Moment lenses are really, really amazing. But just in general, you would need to just consider things a lot more. It's like running around with a 50 mil for 6 months
Yeah.
and not allowed to change your lens at all. So that's a huge consideration as well. And also like just the easeability of it. You can climb over walls a lot easier without having a camera strapped around your neck, and it's just that element of exploration that just becomes a lot more easier because you don't have a huge device around you, you know.
Right. No, of course. And you're an avid social media guy too. Do you ever find you need to take breaks from being online so much? And like, do you need to reset? Like, what's a day off for Gareth Pon?
Yeah. So like I actually never have my phone on audio. So my phone's always on silent, and it's
Interesting. Okay.
but the vibrate's always off. So I don't look at my phone unless I want to. Like it's frustrating for some people if they need to contact me, but people know about it.
Yeah.
So like that's one of the ways that I try and sort of just control it. A day off is me going to find a remote coffee shop and just sitting behind my laptop, either editing photos or doing a bit of writing where I won't check emails or a phone at all.
Yeah.
A lot of people get frustrated when they don't have signal. I love it. And it's just like I had to make a clear distinction of not allowing social media to control me from quite an early stage, because it does get quite addictive. The
Totally.
response, the comments, all of that can go straight to your head as soon as you allow it to, you know. So that's something that I've just been a lot more aware of from starting using Instagram a lot more. Just interestingly enough, though, like I'd know I wasn't really active on social media at all before Instagram. So I mean, I'd use Facebook to keep in touch with people and friends, but I never tweeted. I never like browsed Tumblr or any of that stuff. So Instagram like just really also opened that space up to me.
Yeah.
The main thing is taking a break means going somewhere where there's no reception and just doing something that I love.
Yeah. No, of course. And being a creativity isn't always, a fluid process. It changes and it stops, and it can be hard to get through the lulls. How do you break through creative ruts? Like, how do you come out of that?
So I always start small side projects whenever that happens. Something that totally contrasts what I'm busy with at that moment. So at one stage, I was getting too caught up in editing photos and posting and trying to capture specific subjects and that sort of thing. And when it happened, I started an account called Gareth Pon Vanilla. And the whole idea around vanilla was that nothing's added to it, you know. And that account has since been named just at Gareth. I managed to get that handle luckily. And yeah, so over there I just post non-edited photos. And that's just an example of it. Like I'll start like a side project where it'll be totally opposite from what I'm busy with at the moment. So that helps me just divert my focus. And I feel like that diversion often assists me in keeping creative, in being able to seek out different avenues of creativity. Yeah.
And who are some photographers that inspire you, either historically or contemporary?
Mhm. Well, to be honest with you, the photography scene is obviously still quite new to me. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I mean, like it's only a few years that I've really been in this space. So,
Sure.
I haven't traditionally gone and researched this historical photographer is mind blowing and this and that. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so, in modern times right now, there's guys whose stories have just really stood out for me.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy in Japan. His name is Hiro, and his username is Hiro and then four Z's,
Okay.
four Z's.
Yeah.
Heroes. Um, and he actually just recently got published, featured by CNN
Oh,
today, actually.
fantastic.
And his story is really amazing because he started off just snapping away with his iPhone,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he's now like become a professional photographer and one of the most well-known Instagram guys in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
so his work for me, even before all the fame and all of that, was always really cool because he has a way of capturing scenes that just reflect the moment really well.
Mm-hmm.
Always loved his work. There's a guy in Oregon, also he's a professional photographer
Mm-hmm.
who's utilized Instagram just to broaden his influence.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Ryan Murhead,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
he's just a master of light. Like he captures light amazingly well. He knows exactly where the pocket will lie, and how the shadows will fall in those specific areas. And
Mm-hmm.
his work's just always been really inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, just in terms of within the film space, like I draw a lot of influence from that still.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Of course.
and Terrence Malick, just the way that he puts together,
Mm.
like I would say, lack of narratives,
Yes, definitely.
topics that he approaches. Yeah, that's always been a huge influence for me,
Mm-hmm.
visually, but also within the philosophical mental space.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll often go back to his films and just sort of, I wouldn't say analyze them, but just take them in and self-reflect a bit about how I'm capturing imagery or how I'm directing subjects in my photography space and film space as well. So yeah, like those are just three. I mean, there's hundreds of guys whose
Oh, of
work
course.
I've loved and always go after. But yeah, like those are the main three at the moment who I've really been checking out and just following
Yeah.
quite closely. Yeah.
And when you're out photographing, do you prefer photographing alone or photographing in groups? What's your approach when you're out just making photographs?
Hmm. I do prefer photographing alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just mainly it's easier to get into spaces.
Sure.
Um, there's not an extra body to worry about walking
Yeah.
around. But, with that said, there are certain guys who I feel absolutely comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
going out and taking photos with. The tricky thing is just finding the right moments in the right locations,
Mm-hmm.
because not everyone I go out with will like the spaces that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
When I do organize Insta meets and go out in bigger groups, like actually I won't take as many photos purely because I'm looking after the group more
Yeah.
than she taking the photos. It's also like I become a lot more selective with what I photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when I started off, I'd come back home and have over like 50 photos from a few hours of shooting, and have to like go through them and like take things out and be like, okay, that one's a bit better than that one. Whereas now,
Yeah.
I won't just take a photograph for the sake of it. I'll hone in a bit more on the detail and
Mm-hmm.
just be curated a lot more. So yeah, I think like there's definitely been a change in terms of wanting to go out, whereas now I'm wanting to do a lot more independent missions and explore a lot more independently. So yeah.
Yeah. And how did you learn to slow down and to be more selective about when you make the photograph?
I would say when I ran out of hard drive space.
That'll do it.
No, no, I'm just kidding. I think when I would say probably about maybe mid 2013 or so, where
Mm,
I just realized that I was capturing a lot of quantity, and
mm,
um, it was literally just a moment where I was like, okay, wait, I need to shoot less so I can think a bit more. Like there are definitely times where you need to shoot without thinking, but um, the process of considering the image and the space is
mm,
as much part of making the photo as clicking the shutter, you know. So I think that's really that was the sort of switch for me. Just realizing that the process of photography involves the building up towards it as well.
hmm And is
I don't,
there?
I don't know if that makes sense, but
No,
yeah.
I think it does.
Yeah.
Is there a genre of photography you feel closest to? Because I find that in your Instagram, there's a consistency in style, but the content is kind of varied.
Mm.
How would you, uh, I guess, describe your photography? If there's something you feel closest to or want to explore more?
Mm. Um, to be honest with you, I think it's still a huge process of experimentation for me.
Mm,
I love capturing things in as a different way as differently as possible.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I wouldn't really be able to define what I love shooting the most, but at the moment it's definitely documentary
Mm-hmm.
or leaning towards documentary and just people. I've always loved photographing people.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a big thing. But for me, it is definitely still huge experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say now I'm a portrait photographer or a
Sure.
landscape. I definitely think like 5 years from now, I still won't know what that is. What I have been saying a lot this year is that I believe that photography has become like the new pencil.
Hmm.
So when the pencil became available to public and started
Right.
being used as a way to create art, I feel like photography is that next pencil, that it's going to give birth to a lot more mediums, a lot more
Mm-hmm.
ways of creating. Mixed media is obviously the term for that, but I do believe that it's mentally it's that new pencil. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's something that's going to start exploring new spaces and unknown places within the art space, and not only just keeping it as a medium. So a lot of guys will be like, "So what do you think about the future of photography?" And like that's what I believe it
Mm-hmm.
is, you know. So I'm trying to figure that out. Like
Sure.
I believe a lot of people are still exploring that space.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in terms of just what I shoot, I feel like I would say it's just a continuous method of experimentation.
Yeah. And as far as photography being the next pencil, which I think is a great way to put it, what do you think that means for South Africa as a
Mm.
community?
Well, I mean, like South Africa has so much potential. Just
Mm-hmm.
it's in the last year I've seen so much happen on just a personal basis and friends as well, just exploring the space.
Mm-hmm.
I think like there's going to be obviously with social media being quite a dominant factor in the world right now.
Of course.
That's going to open a lot more doors for creatives
Mm-hmm.
to be able to explore spaces and places. Johannesburg, the city I live in, just it was named one of the up and coming art cities in the world
Hmm.
last year, which was quite exciting. Um, and it's just that I feel like as soon as that revere comes and as it grows a lot more within South Africa, a lot of guys will start being proud to be a creative and
Mm-hmm.
being proud to sort of push the boundaries and take a bit more risks within the
Mm-hmm.
space. And for the communities, I think guys will just start exploring it a lot more. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it comes back to that thing of not being scared to to just do it, you know.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot more guys taking risks already, a lot more guys going independent and trying to pursue their passion for creativity.
Hmm.
That's amazing because it's not something that you see quite commonly.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
of course. And we're moving to the question that I ask every photographer at the end of these interviews, and I've asked in my text interviews too. Say you come across someone who's just picked up their phone and they're really considering photographing with this seriously, not just as a way to document meals. What's one piece of advice you'd give to a beginning mobile photographer?
I would definitely say that don't worry about the tech, worry about the emotion.
Hmm.
So you can have the best camera in the world or the worst camera in the world, but if you don't hone in on the emotion of a moment, then you'll never take a good image. Like, I think that's something that's always stood out for me is like you can get trained up and study years to become a photographer, but there's a distinct difference between being able to tell a story through an image versus being able to take a very technically strong photo.
Hmm.
And I feel like a lot of guys are starting off are so scared of tech, so they over research the tech,
Yeah.
and then the tech ends up taking precedence where it shouldn't. It should be the other way around. Back in the day, maybe when it wasn't as accessible, but nowadays you can take amazing photos with just a mobile device. So take advantage of that.
Hmm.
A lot of traditional photographers will probably tell you otherwise, but I believe that within that naiveness and that ignorance,
Hmm.
that's where you'll ultimately find what your style is and where you want to go as a photographer.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks so much for doing this.
Cool. It's amazing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, of course. This has been great. Thanks so much for watching. This has been ISO 400. For more of Gareth's work, head on over to Instagram and type in Gareth Pon. You can also go to garethpon.com. For more about what we do, head on over to thephotographer.com. All of those links are in the description down below. If you like what we do, please hit subscribe and share this with your friends. Thanks so much and see you next week.